again. And today I'd like to talk about why I enjoy manga, manhua, and manhwa, and why these particular things are so good for someone like myself, but not just someone like myself, but also for other people who might be interested in checking it out. Now, I've got a bit of a small article I found online, and this will sort of help with what I'm trying to help get across. And this is the Hooked to Books website, and big thanks and shout out to them. I don't know if they've got a YouTube channel or not, but if they happen to have one, thanks again. And it's nice that they've got this up here. And as we can see here, we've got a bit of a it shares a bit of a difference between each of these particular types of comics and where they actually originate from. Now, to those who saw ma- um, my Monkey Prince review, especially of issue one, um, you'll see in that particular one that I talk about the difference of how um, each m- manga, manhwa, and manhua is slightly different. Now, this is just to give a little bit more of a briefer understanding um, in the story, and of course, it shares that yes, it shows where what areas these stories come from, and you know what? I personally enjoy that. Now, one as this video also goes up, I've also been talking to someone at a new store here in Melbourne, Australia, in the CBD. And yes, this person runs a store called Moko Select. And one of the things that I sort of enjoy talking with the person, I'm like very new to their store, but I definitely enjoy what their store offers because they offer basically figurines in relation to, say, for manga, um, maybe a little bit of manhwa, plus additional things. And they even get in like comic related stuff. And of course, we've got a bit of a talk here about the rise of manga. And one thing that I really enjoy about manga is that, or about with all three of these particular um, types of comics, is that they are not afraid in any way to explore the main character hero's journey, especially if you're looking for something that respects the journey along the way. Um, where a lot of the Western comics these days have really fallen short of that journey. And no hate against the Western comics, there are a number of Western comics that I also pick up too. Like, I'm not afraid to pick up manga, I'm not afraid to pick up manhwa, I'm not afraid to pick up manhua. Why? Because all of these things have something that they can offer. Um, whether it's the artwork, each artist is completely different. And as you can get a bit of a visual reference here, um, not all of these characters' eyes are big and boldy, as you can see here. In fact, there's a character in this picture, or actually a few characters that I have read about here. There's a character from Blue Exorcist, there's Naruto, and also One Punch Man. And I'm slowly moving on to Bleach, and you can see those characters there, and you can certainly see that there is a difference in the art style. Um, we, and of course, there's Monkey D. Luffy. Of course, when you look at the older manga, for example, such as whether you go to the Osamu Tezuka, Astro Boy, Um, don't get me wrong, Astro Boy is an incredible series, and I'd actually like to revisit it, maybe even on the channel too. Um, but with that, we also get a list of other things that we learn too. because if it's one thing with a number of these writers or creators of manga, manhwa, and manhua, they also share some of the things that inspired them to do said manga. And you won't believe what some of the answers are. For example, My Hero Academia. The creator of that is inspired by, first things first, let's not forget, we have Star Wars. Now, is Star Wars a Eastern concept? Is it in any shape or form related to what comes out in the Japanese manga or the manhwa? Not much at all. Why? Because it's an exploration of science fiction to science fiction fantasy, and it's absolutely incredible. And you will have stories based on that, and you'll also see that in the manhwa and the manhua as well. Why? Because they are inspired by what the West has given to the East. And then you have the West trying to give to the East, but sometimes it lands on deaf ears. I mean it. It can land on deaf ears, including in some of the comics. Um, but I think one good direction to which, for example, DC is taking at the moment, and that is with the Monkey Prince series, because if it's one series um, that I really enjoyed when younger, and I also shared a review of it on the channel, and that was on the Monkey series, and it is incredible. Yes, even though it was done by Japan, it respects its origins, which belong in that of China, and it is an amazing story. So if the East can be even inspired from things in the East, so Japan being inspired by things in Japan, in China, but also Japanese history, etc. Right? What should make the West any different? Yes, they're not afraid to explore politics. Yes, they're not afraid to explore other things as well. But it's not done to a point to where it's over the top, in your face, 24/7. And this is why people give the impression, give the answer is that poli- uh, comics have become way too political. Well, in some cases, they feel more like a political propaganda pamphlet. And that's the last thing that you want in your face, in your storytelling. Now, I've also heard some people say, yes, comics are political. Well, in some essences, yes, other essences, no. But where are you going for your source, even for your definition to which you are getting the politicized comic? Because when you look at, say, for example, DC Comics and Marvel Comics, a lot was being done at the time to sort of like bring out their own heroes, which represented the US, and also their ideals. And that is all fine. Even Australia has its own comics, to which it also represents its ideals from things like the Fair Go and other things. Um, but we also want to explore Like, for example, what would happen if the Earth rebooted? Now, that's sort of seen, for example, in example Doctor Stone. Even though Doctor Stone is set in a post-apocalyptic future, looking to sort of like get some normalcy using science, that is a fantastic idea. And even though the series has ended, I would love to see it come back for maybe a sequel. But all it was sort of like exploring the clash of ideas. That's all it was. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes, it still had science in it. Yes, it still had character growth in it. But we still got other things that built up these characters and built up this world. Another thing, too, is that a number of the Western characters have also forgotten um, much of the world building, because the world building not only consists of its own characters but also the places that make up where these characters go to. If it's Superman, where is his main place of operations? Well, for Superman himself, it's Metropolis. But when he's um, teamed up with all the Justice League, it's either in the Watchtower or the Hall of Justice. Another example of this, if I were to bring this over to manga, manhwa, and manhua related, we've got Fairy Tale. Now, I've not someone who's watched a Fairy Tale series, but they've in that series they have a guild. Um, in Hunter x Hunter, they have different specialized hunters that specialize in different areas. So each one explores a certain aspect to which helps make up that world. Uh, Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho is at one time a detective of the paranormal or of some paranormal events. And that is absolutely amazing. It is incredible. And we need things like this. Um, in regards to, say, Chinese storytelling, I love the story of the Journey to the East. And if it wasn't for Japan bringing out the Monkey series, I probably, number one, would not have known about the story of the Journey to the East. But I still want to check out more in relation to that story. I've seen, I think, one movie as well in relation to it too, and then there's whatever that they've branched out into series. It's really good, and it gets the reader um, inspired to read more. Why? Because not only are we exploring this character's journey, we're also exploring this character's journey even with their friends. And this, again, is seen with all three of these types of comics. Yes, they're from different regions, but you also get to learn, for example, what is the mythology around certain regions, or how even they explore their own worlds for us to explore. Now, moving into, say, for example, back again to the Western comics, we do need to see basically the rebirth, and I mean the rebirth of the hero's journey, right? End this politics garbage. Let's restore the hero's journey. Sure, I don't care if you've got a character who we learn later on is gay. Like, one good example for that I want to bring up is um, Gotham Academy, done by Becky Cloonan. One of the characters in that particular series, Colton, was gay, and we didn't learn until that character was gay until later on in the storytelling. But even in the three mentioned here, manga, manhua, and manhwa, they too explore the LGBTIQ alphabet group, whatever, however you want to say it. But they do it. They do these stories separately in their own books. So normally, when you see a lot of these books, it's actually done in its own particular run. And trust me, some of these books can get cult status. Other books can get popularity to which it's popular enough that it ends up either becoming an animated series to even a live action series. And they're not afraid in manga, manhwa, and manhwa um, to give core source content where in the West it's like they're scared like mice to be completely honest. They have become scared like mice, scared of the big cat which has become manga, manhwa, and manhua. And let's not also forget maybe even some of the European titles, which are maybe even outselling them to even indie titles. Now, building up back again in this, in in a lot of essences, manga, manhwa, and manhua are also an independent comic source or an independent graphic novel source to which someone can go and read and pick up. And yes, the fact that it's in a graphic novel form makes it so much easier. Yes, there's webtoons, and to those who watch the channel, you've probably seen me do cover some webtoons, and I do plan on covering more. Whatever titles they are, I'm not too sure yet, but I do know the main titles I do tend to stick with, and that is the Wayne Family Adventures, and I enjoy what they have done with that story. About the only thing that I would sort of change in relation to for what DC Comics is doing with their webtoons is give a recommendation at the end of each webtoon to, for example, put the or put some comic titles in there that connect in relation to the characters that are shown in the story. That is the only other additional thing that I would add, because you do see this with manga titles, even manhwa titles. With the ablaze I've picked up, with the breaker, there are still recommendations of manga or manhwa that I can read and check out. Um, Solo Leveling is a manhwa that I want to pick up, and only because of what people have said about it in reviews. That's one reason why I'd like to pick it up, because I want to enjoy and explore this hero's journey. Because without the hero's journey, or without the main character's journey, like we do desire to see a beginning, a middle, and an end. Not only that, the closest thing that reached manga mainly in relation to, for example, DC Comics. And I'm going to say this bluntly, and that is the Super Sons with Peter J. Tomasi, Patrick Gleason, and also Jorge Jimenez, plus the additional creators that have worked on the series, or the additional artists, pencilers, letterers that have also worked on that series. Because without having this hero's journey, we need to see, okay, what is the character's adversary? Because every character needs an adversary of sorts or a rival. Where with Haikyuu, his rival, or the character in Haikyuu, for one example, it might be one of his teammates. We already know with Naruto, his rival is Sasuke, but Sasuke also becomes his good friend. In relation to some of the webtoon titles, I still need to read a little bit more of them, but what I've read of them so far, um, maybe for one example, one's rival might be someone that might be of a different news group that might get bigger bigger stories than what the main character is getting, until it builds up and reaches the very end. We required a hero's journey quite a lot, and manga, manhua, and manhwa aren't afraid to explore it. And they do many different ways. And that's the truth. They do it in many different ways. And the fact that they do it many different ways also shows that their artwork is done in many different ways. And also story is done in many different ways. And by that, we do learn not only that, cultural aspects amongst many things, but we get to see what each person personally enjoys. And I know for the person who did Blue Exorcist, now I'll go back to this, no, not here, up here. The person who did Blue Exorcist, Kazukato, they are a female manga creator. And one of her inspirations was the Grimm's fairy tales. That's right, the Grimm's fairy tales. And to those who have maybe even read up or know about the Grimm fairy tales, will know that each story has its own beginning, middle, end. It's also got its own separate characters. Some stories more darker than others. And then there's Black Clover, for example. That's another one. Now, we know that Black Clover also explores, say, for example, a lot of European history in its own way, but in a fictional point of view, but also explores the area of the supernatural and why they are basically caught in awe that we in the West sometimes tend to stray away from our roots. And sometimes it takes the outsider looking in to remind us in the West of our roots, right? Of the things that make, or that made some of our storytelling so awe inspiring to this particular writer or this particular creator. So who knows? Maybe there might be someone who would want to do a manga, manhwa, or manhwa series on Skippy the Bush Kangaroo, but it's not going to be called Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. It might be called something else. And that's just going from an Australian aspect, because in Australia, Skippy is a bit of a series that went ongoing for a couple of seasons and then eventually stopped. And with it eventually stopping, we we didn't really get much of that. But for someone that might be on the outside looking in, they might see this series and think, "Oh, this is great! I could totally create a story around a kangaroo type hero." And then when we see where they look, where they are inspired to, it reminds us, oh, that was a part of our history and still is a part of our history. It's something that we should not forget. And this is why manga, manhwa, and manhua is also there. It can also be there to make sure that we don't forget these things that made stories great for us, even in the West. Now, the hardest thing for many of the things today, especially in storytelling, is trying to match what the East is doing in how they respect it. And looking at the sales, especially between manga, manhwa, and manhua compared to Western comic sales, yeah, at the moment, they're giving the West a big owl, right? Yes, we might have our different range of writers. And because we do have our different range of writers, some people are better for other projects over projects that they're actually put on. One example is, as much as I dislike both Robbie Thompson and Adam Glass, I have managed to come across something in relation to what Adam Glass did. And he did a story in Independent called Brick, and it's a story that revolves sort of like a young hero's journey to which he wants to become a hero of the neighborhood because there's gangs and that. And the thing is, this story is an independent story. It's not in DC, but it's probably one story that I enjoy more than the damage that he played a part in destroying Damian Wayne's character. Why? Because that hero had a journey. Yes, that hero got to explore the supernatural, but we also got to see that character learn to stick up for themselves. When it moves when it moves to bringing him into DC Comics to write, he is personally not best suited to write the Teen Titans. I disliked what happened with him. Well, I totally disliked what happened with Damian Wayne's character in the Teen Titans. I disliked it to the core. Why? Because there were things that were done to Damian Wayne's character that literally removed the heart of his character. Yeah, it did show some things to his character. In other words, that he could actually choose some people um, of variant abilities, maybe of variant backgrounds, plus still bring in some that the public might know. I still dislike the character of the Jin. That character ruined the story. If anything, she was the equivalent of Deathstroke meets Terra from the Judas contract, and it was terrible. And it's just something that needs to die off. Like, if you're going to bring in a character that might be a genie, how about you bring one about the same age as Damien's character, not a different age as Damien's character? Then there's the nasty stuff that Robbie Thompson did, and that is disgraceful too. And then there's like other things that also happened. But when we move into writers who can execute not only in the indie but also in mainstream DC Comics, for example, I'm using DC Comics here because I do mainly read DC Comics more than Marvel and independent. Peter J. Tomasi can write really good independent comics just as well as he can write um, very good DC comics. And it wouldn't matter what title you put him on. He's written, for example, Nightwing, to which I think um, there was a graphic novel that came out, and I think it was covered about, might have been 6 to maybe 12 issues. And it was a fantastic story in that. The next thing that Peter J. Tomasi is fantastic for, not only that, he also has editor experience. And that is Batman and Robin. Absolutely incredible run. Of course, the Superman Rebirth run and also the Super Sons. These are all amazing titles done by one creator. Now, I could now apply this to, for example, maybe a manga, because it's easier because I've read more manga than manhwa and additional titles. Um, the creator of Fairy Tail has written quite a number of titles. Not just Fairy Tail, he's done Rave Master, so that was one of his first titles. Then it was Fairy Tail. He also did another one called Heroes, just a short story, but I do believe there is going to be a sequel to that. Then we have another one, the Thousand Year Quest. I think it. No, 100 year Fairy Tale, 100 year quest, and then there's Eden Zero. So it shows the projects that this creator has actually done, and you have many people go and enjoy it. I have personally been reading Hiro Mashima's In Zero, and I really enjoy it. And this story is done specifically so it's easier for Westerners to enjoy, and that is why that series has been done. And it's really nice to see that how one place can be inspired by another place, and by that, and by both groups of people being inspired by each other, it also reminds us that sometimes for us to succeed, even here in the West, we need to return to the roots. Now, the best example with that, for example, DC Comics was DC Rebirth. That is the best example that I can use here. Nothing more, nothing less. Because out of DC Rebirth, we had um, Superman, which was being written by Dan Jurgens, but Dan Jurgens also worked on the Batman Beyond run, which I also enjoyed. Um, then we had Peter J. Tomasi working on Superman. Of course, at the time we had Tinian working on Detective Comics, and there were a number of good stories in there that I also enjoyed. And then, of course, we had Tom King on Batman, and there were a number of hit and miss stories in the Tom King. Then we had it return to Tinian. And over time, some of those stories just became a mess. It literally became a mess until we found some slow build up back for what was happening. For example, when Brian Michael Bendis was put on the Superman family, it brought the pure destruction. Right? It played a big part on the pure destruction of Detective Comics. And on top of that, he was given so many titles, probably way too many titles to deal with. And he should have just been kept on Elseworlds permanently. And I mean it, just Elseworlds permanently. Now, in regards to Manga, Manhwa, and Manhua, whether they actually explore Elseworld stories. Actually, I believe one manga title has explored an Elseworld story, and that was dealing with Dragon Ball and the character of Yamcha. To which I heard that story was actually really well received. Well, I might begin to stop it here now. In relation to this discussion of why I enjoy manga, Manhua, and Manwha. And until then, let's keep it colorful. And actually, before I leave, if there is anything that you are reading, that you are enjoying, that come out of any three of these types of comics, where it's the Japanese comics, the manga, uh, the Chinese, the manhua, or the Korean, the manhwa, please let me know what you're enjoying in the comments. Well, until then, let's keep it colorful and have yourself an